Military doctrine is the expression of how military forces contribute to campaigns, major operations, battles, and engagements. It is a guide to action, rather than hard and fast rules. Doctrine provides a common frame of reference across the military. It helps standardize operations, facilitating readiness by establishing common ways of accomplishing military tasks. Doctrine links theory, history, experimentation, and practice. Its objective is to foster initiative and creative thinking. Doctrine provides the military with an authoritative body of statements on how military forces conduct operations and provides a common lexicon for use by military planners and leaders. Defining doctrine. NATO's definition of doctrine, used unaltered by many member nations, is fundamental principles by which the military forces guide their actions in support of objectives. It is authoritative but requires judgment in application. The Canadian Army states, military doctrine is a formal expression of military knowledge and thought that the Army accepts as being relevant at a given time, which covers the nature of conflict, the preparation of the Army for conflict, and the method of engaging in conflict to achieve success. It is descriptive rather than prescriptive, requiring judgment in application. It does not establish dogma or provide a checklist of procedures, but is rather an authoritative guide, describing how the Army thinks about fighting, not how to fight. As such, it attempts to be definitive enough to guide military activity, yet versatile enough to accommodate a wide variety of situations. A U.S. Air Force Air University staff study in 1948 defined military doctrine functionally as those concepts, principles, policies, tactics, techniques, practices, and procedures which are essential to efficiency in organizing, training, equipping, and employing its tactical and service units. Gary Sheffield, of the Defense Studies Department of King's College London, JSCSC, quoted J.F.C. Fuller's 1923 definition of doctrine as the central idea of an army. The Soviet Dictionary of Basic Military Terms defined military doctrine as a state's officially accepted system of scientifically founded views on the nature of modern wars and the use of the armed forces in them. Military doctrine has two aspects: social political and military technical. The social political side encompasses all questions concerning methodology, economic and social bases, the political goals of war. It is the defining and the more stable side. The other side, the military technical, must accord with the political goals. It includes the creation of military structure, technical equipping of the armed forces, the training, definition of forms and means of conducting operations and war as a whole. See also Allied Joint Publication 01 EDITIONISSUED 21 December 2010. Development of doctrine. Before the development of separate doctrinal publications, many nations expressed the military philosophy through regulations. United Kingdom. Field Service Regulations were issued by the War Office in 1909, 1917, 1923, 1930, and 1935. Similar publications under various names were subsequently published. Formal British military doctrine was first published in 1988 and in 1996 became British defence doctrine applicable throughout the armed forces. France. The development of military doctrine in France came about in the aftermath of the nation's defeat during the Franco-Prussian War. The École Supérieure de Guerre, under the direction of its commandant, Ferdinand Foch, began developing a consistent doctrine for handling armies, corps, and divisions. Foch's 1906 work, Des Principes de la Guerre, expressed this doctrine. Prussia and German Empire. Prussian doctrine was published as regulations for the instruction of the troops in field service and the exercises of the larger units of the 17th June, 1870. The doctrine was revised in 1887 and published in English in 1893 as the Order of Field Service of the German Army, by Karl Kaltenborn und Stachau, and once again in 1908 as Feldinstordnung, United States. In the period between the Napoleonic Wars and the First World War, doctrine was defined by the War Department in Field Service Regulations. Quote, in addition, many officers wrote military manuals that were printed by private publishers, such as Hardy's Tactics, used by both Confederate and Union forces. General George B. McClellan wrote a cavalry manual, regulations and instructions for the field service of the U.S. cavalry, in 1862. The General Staff became responsible for writing field service regulations. They were published in 1908, were revised in 1913 and again in 1914 based on experiences of European powers in the first months of the war. As late as 1941, U.S. Army doctrine was published in Field Service Regulations, Operations. This designation was dropped and replaced by U.S. Army Field Manuals. Relationship between doctrine and strategy. Doctrine is not strategy. NATO's definition of strategy is presenting the manner in which military power should be developed and applied to achieve national objectives or those of a group of nations. The official definition of strategy by the United States Department of Defense is, strategy is a prudent idea, a set of ideas for employing the instruments of national power in a synchronized and integrated fashion to achieve national and multinational objectives. Military strategy provides the rationale for military operations. Field Marshal Viscount Alan Brooke, Chief of the Imperial General Staff and co-chairman of the Anglo-US Combined Chiefs of Staff Committee for most of the Second World War, described the art of military strategy as to derive from the aim a series of military objectives to be achieved, to assess these objectives as to the military requirements they create, and the preconditions which the achievement of each is likely to necessitate, to measure available and potential resources against the requirements and to chart from this process a coherent pattern of priorities and a rational course of action. Instead, doctrine seeks to provide a common conceptual framework for a military service, what the service perceives itself to be, what its mission is, how the mission is to be carried out, how the mission has been carried out in history, other questions. In the same way, doctrine is neither operations nor tactics. It serves as a conceptual framework uniting all three levels of warfare. Doctrine reflects the judgments of professional military officers, and to a lesser but important extent civilian leaders, about what is and is not militarily possible and necessary. Factors to consider include military technology, national geography, the capabilities of adversaries, the capability of one's own organization,